I'm so happy to be on. It is 6 o'clock. Healing Reflections with Keisha from New Beginning Healing Institute. And I'm just going to check my volume to make sure that we're good. Let me just see here. Let me turn my volume up. Like it's way up. Okay, awesome. So it's good to be back. Happy Saturday. Hopefully you had maybe some time of rest today. I know I did. I had a chance to spend some time with my husband today and my daughter. Went to his project today to support his courage and what he's doing. So I'm excited to do that today and to get some rest. I did take a nap this afternoon prior to coming live, and I'm really excited about today's topic. Of course, I promised to do a 7-week series, and I have decided to call it Healing Reflections with Keisha. And I think it's just very simple. And by now we all know that healing is it's universal. We have a need to heal all over the world, because we all go through different things. We're always in some kind of transition or experiencing some kind of difficulty. One of my favorite quotes says that difficulties and existentialism is the cornerstone of humanity, right? So difficulties, existentialism, and I like that word existentialism. It means, those things that are outside of our control, and they come to all of us. And so because of that, then we're going to hurt. And so we're going to have need for healing in different ways. And so Healing Reflections with Keisha, I just think it's simple because we're always in need of some form of healing at different points in our lives. So welcome. Happy Saturday. And of course, by the way, I don't have anything scripted. This is just my devotional, and it's purposeful. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And of course, my little 3x5 card, because this has information on here that I talked about in our last reflection together, and I want to weave it into our talk this evening. And of course, Healing of the Heart, lessons from my journey, and of course what we're going to read today. So I have everything. Whenever I come on here, it is not scripted by any means. I just don't believe in that. I'm not in my classroom. I'm not before my peers. So this is just an open space. It's an open space for all of us, and I get to share my personal experiences and also my professional ones, and it's a blueprint for others to be supported, and also for encouragement for all of us and for each of us. So as I did last time, I start with my affirmations. Actually, I think I said last time that word is not strong enough for me. I call it my truths, right? TRUTHS. And so I'm going to pull it off my wall, and I'm going to read it. And before I read them, just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's listening to Healing of the Heart podcast. Again, I do get the metrics every week, and this week I noticed that when I released the second session, which was on identity last week, I recognized that we had 41 downloads in Japan alone, and I believe 11 downloads in Singapore, and on and on and on. So I just want to say I see that you're listening, and there has to be a reason why you're listening. We have a connection, and I'm so grateful that we have the connection, and what we're talking about has meaning for you and has impact and will help you to move forward. And how appropriate then, because moving forward needs courage. And so tonight we're going to be talking a little bit more about courage. So to continue then, just to read my truths from my truth card. So I have it titled, To Remain in the Frequency of Abundance, to align with Him. Number 1, I am calm because I trust in divine timing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, especially in the middle of somewhere in our discussion with courage. And number 2, let me read that again. Number 1, I am calm because I trust in divine timing. That is really important. So I don't need to be anxious about anything, as the scripture says. And there's a reason why we're encouraged not to be anxious. So this is where this truth came from for me. I am calm because I trust in divine timing. Number 2, I am bold because I am made in the greatness of His image. I am bold because I am made in the greatness of his image. Okay, and number 3, and above all, it's doing it again because I have that limit on set. Okay, so it's off. And number 3, above all, I do what I say I would do. Case in point, I am doing this live. Because typically I record the videos and I just do it, and I'm like, no one has to see me and I don't have to, but no, I'm doing what I said I would do. And that's courage, right? Because it takes courage to do any of this. It really does. And it takes courage to do anything that's meaningful in our lives. So I'm going to place this right here. So, I gave some thought to this topic for today. And courage is a very important ingredient in our lives. It's an important ingredient to continue to reinforce in our constitution. And we have a seed, right? And we have a seed there that is already made perfect, so that courage can flow from that seed. And that seed I am referring to is called faith. It's faith. It's that belief that you can do something. You can do that something that you were designed to do. And that goes right back to last week. We're talking about identity. Now, building from last week, I spent a lot of time talking about spiritual bypassing and cultural bypassing, and how those two phenomenons, if you will, really impacts identity. Now, I've been thinking about that since the time that we spoke, and of course, over the course of this work that I've been doing for the past 17 plus years. Yes, it's been that long. And during the course of the last week or so, I was meditating on that, and this is what came in my heart for me. This is what came in my heart for me, and this is what I hear in my heart. And let me just say what I heard in my heart. To be true to yourself, Keisha, you have to be true to Christ. It's just, so my true identity comes from him. And so if I am going to move about in doing what I know and what is placed in my heart to do and what is designed for me, then I have to be true to that. I have to be true to what's on the inside. And so this is, if I'm not true to that, then what identity am I walking in? Did you hear my truth that I just read? Right? Where does that come from? That really informs and shapes who I am. So when we have spiritual traditions and beliefs that are not aligned with that, cultural beliefs that are not aligned with that, and that's all we know, and that's all we've been taught. But deep down, there's something in you that really rebels against that. It rebels, it's not in sync. And deep down that there's something more for you. But how do you find the courage to do that? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So before we get more into the reflection piece and talking about that, as always, I'm going to read from Healing of the Heart, Lessons from My Journey. And I usually either read a poem or I read a story. Last time I read a poem. This evening I'm going to read a story. Now this story is a mixture of my own story and the story of other women that I've served. So here we go. This is on page 13. If you have the book, it's on page 13. It says intro. And every story in the book is an introduction to the poetry that follows after, because the story informs the poetry. I think I've shared that before. So intro, which is called Begin Again. Begin again. It requires courage to begin again, no matter how many times that we have been derailed because of whatever it is, situations, circumstances, events, actions of our own that was shaped by perhaps events, circumstances, and other people. Because we know influences are real. They show up, whether we're paying attention to them or not. We have influences all around us. We need to slow down long enough to pay attention to see exactly what they are. And Healing Reflections is exactly what it is. It's meant to do that, or as one of the vehicles that will help us to do that. This stuff can show up in your marriage and parenting relationships. things like poor self-esteem, unresolved issues and insecurities, baggage from the past, including parent-child relationships. Baggage weighed me down. Due to baggage, I found myself responding instead of listening, always defending instead of connecting emotionally, essentially making everything about me and from a negative place of being. Connecting emotionally is a deficit I've had for a long time. I've had to work hard to grow through this for the sake of my family, especially my children. Oh, the blunders that came before. In the midst of trying to meet the needs of those depending on me, I was in conflict trying to meet my own needs. And by the way, my own needs there talks about the emotional needs that every child has when he or she's growing up that perhaps was not met due to environmental lack. So that's a whole different conversation. But I think you understand when I say environmental lack. Whomever's in the environment, whether it's parents, whether it's a physical need that was not met, basic needs, or perhaps that emotional need that is not met by the parent or caregiver. Why? Because they lack. And so parents can't give what they don't have. They can do their best. It doesn't excuse, but it gives understanding. Because I often felt misunderstood and judged. At times, I wanted to retreat to protect myself. Thankfully, some encounters were different. These exceptions were my children, spouse, and mentors. They were compassionate enough, which encouraged me to take a better look at myself. It takes courage to look at ourselves, especially when we know that there are parts of ourselves that we know deep down, right, that it's not in alignment. Once again, it's not in alignment with who we truly desire to be and who we truly desire and design to be to accomplish what we need to accomplish, whether that's in our parent relationship or parent-child relationship, whether that's in our marriage relationship. See this word relationship, because it's all about the relationships. And when we have parts of ourselves, that is just not in a proper alignment, and there is this disfigurement that we talked about the last time, you're not going to feel good. There's just going to be this discrepancy, discrepancy. You're not aligned. It's going to show up in these relationships. I learned to examine myself without judgment, to be compassionate to myself, and begin again. My mentor, I won't say her name because I'm on live, always said, your life experiences will prove valuable to your clients one day. It has happened. So that's the thing, right? People have a way of making us feel like our past versions of ourselves have no value, but it does. Because I will tell you that I was a teen mom, and I was a woman who struggled with a strong sense of self and self-esteem, because by now you know my story. Father absence has significant impacts on your, development, psychosocial development, emotional development, health. It has significant impacts. Pause. This is exactly what my research centers on. So when you have these deficits, when you have these losses, when you have these needs that are not met, particularly from specific or certain types of caregivers, there's a loss that occurs, and it does shape your autonomic nervous system. It does shape how your brain perceives the world and how you perceive yourself. And so this dissonance that you feel on the inside, this disconnect that you feel on the inside, this sense of loss that you feel on the inside, this sense of emptiness that you feel on the inside, that is not, what's what I'm looking for? That's not out of the way. It is actually normal based on the experience that you have lived. In other words, there's no need to be ashamed of your life. No need. Begin again. Yet here I was thinking I had to be perfect. And I know most of us listening still think that we have to be perfect. And in our various settings, people have a way of saying and doing things that remind us of where we're coming from. It has a way of reminding us of the feelings that were already developed as a result of those past experiences. What am I plainly saying? What I'm saying is, when we're growing up and we've had these negative or difficult experiences, especially in our pre-language years, when you don't have a lot of sophistication around your language, you can't fully express yourself, or maybe when you could express yourself, you were not allowed to because of cultural norms or spiritual norms, as we had mentioned last time. So what that does, it creates what we call these implicit feelings. That means feelings that were created based on events, circumstances, or people, and they already formed, and those feelings, because they were not expressed, what do? Boy, they have a way of shaping the brain. They shape the brain, and what the brain does is tell the body how to respond. And remember, language is a part of the brain, which is the right part of the brain. And so these experiences shapes language and shapes the emotions that flow through us. And so a lot of us then, and I include myself because this is true, we grow up with this sense of the need to be perfect. The perfection syndrome. In 21st century, people call it, what is the word they call it? No, not the helicopter, but there's another terminology that they talk about this particular syndrome. I can't think of it right now. But this need to be perfect. And these same individuals in our lives today that perhaps want to bring us back to that version of ourselves that we're working from, or we desire to work from. What I find to be true is that these same persons that enact or display these behaviors, they too went through some of these same environments that I mentioned. They too were shamed or did not have those specific needs met. And so what they do, they inflict that on other people, others like you and myself. And then you have this whole cycle of these kinds of negative ways of being, this reminder of these implicit ways of being in ourselves. And if we're not careful, we continue to reproduce them. So, courage then. How can we have courage after having experienced all that? So here I'm going to pause and just have you think about that. Right? Have you think about that. How can we have courage? In fact, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you have that courage. I'm going to sip on my ginger tea. All right. So here's a prompt from Begin Again, is the title of the story. The prompt says, have the seeds of discouragement planted from childhood echoed in your adult life? How about viewing the echo as an opportunity to relearn? That means to go back and look at those parts. Go back and look at those parts. And remember how we talked about poetry helps us to do that. It softens the experience. Because what poetry does is allows you to lay aside the judgment. It moves your story a little bit away from you, so you can look at it through the lens of someone else's story. And then perhaps it softens the look to say, maybe I can take a look at what this means for me, or if I can relate to this in some way. It also provides the space for someone to say, I'm not alone. Someone else has gone through this. Which brings me to my next point that I want to talk about. We're not all that different. As I mentioned before, that healing is universal. We're not all that different. So I was reflecting again. Reflection is really important. You hear me say that quite a bit, right? In order to reflect, we have to have a sense of quiet on the inside. It's taken me years to get to that point. This is what happens when you do the work in your life, and you can slowly but surely look at those parts of yourself, because it's not easy. So again, as I was mentioning, that we're not all that different when it comes on to pain, when it comes on to difficult life experiences. When I was in full-time practice, I remember that the demographics of my clientele started changing. I was still seeing women and girls, but at one point I recognized that I was getting what we call high-profile referrals. I started seeing persons that were from the NFL background, pro tennis I was seeing screenplay writers. I was that circle. And I couldn't understand, like, how was that happening? No, I'm serious. I said to myself, how did they find me? Because, I mean, you know, how did they find me? And why were they finding me? And that leads me to say, your story matters. Your story matters. Your story matters, because then my story matters. Had I not step out on courage and say, you know what, my experience is not, my grandmother would say, is not for naught. No. It cannot be. I did not experience what I experienced just because. And so courage does not come by a feeling, because remember, most of what we have inside are difficult experiences, and those feelings are very negative. So if I relied only on those feelings, then I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be in private practice now for the past since 2018. I wouldn't have written the things that I've written and have done all the things that you've seen me do from a place of conviction and commitment. That's courage. So that's what my courage looks like. So I mentioned that my clientele started changing and I couldn't understand it. But as time went on, I understand, and I'm still understanding. It took courage for me to step out of that shame that I was carrying for years, that created this it's like a shell over the real person, the real identity. It had to be broken. And so the courage then came by recognizing that I'm not a victim. When you recognize that you're not a victim, then those things that have happened, you recognize then is part of your journey. And you are to use it. You are to use it. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing here. So healing is global. So these persons that I just mentioned, they're from what we call, high profile referrals. And I will tell you, I did not know. I learned when I was seeing these different kind of high profile clients and cases, I didn't even know that insurance companies have selective parts of the insurance for these kinds of persons. I never knew that. Like, I was like, whoa, it was a whole different realm. And again, the courage, right? The courage to step forward, even though I didn't know what any of this would look like. I just didn't know. I didn't know what it would look like. But again, deep down inside, I knew that there was something for me to do. It left me restless every day. Do you have something that's leaving you restless that you know you need to do? You don't know what it's going to look like. You don't have to. You're not be all, know it all, but you have enough knowing, right, to know that there's something for you to do. So sometimes courage is just simply showing up for yourself one more day. Just one more day. One more day. Just like you showed up to listen to this live, maybe you're going to play this back again for yourself, because maybe parts of this live that I've said you can connect with. Speaking about assignment, I found it interesting that this morning I woke up and I was doing my devotional. You can see today's July 25th. That's the page. And what does it say? It says that you have an assignment. I said, how appropriate for today. I'm going to read the scripture. It's 2 Samuel 7, verse 27. It says, you, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant. I will build you a house. I'll build you a house. So this is an assignment that David recognized that God was giving him. And truth be told, God gives us all assignments. And you know what? He speaks to the heart. And so this is where you have to listen and pay attention. Let me finish reading. So your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you. Ooh. Let me read that again. You, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, have revealed this to your servant. I will build you a house. So David had an assignment to build a house. what's your assignment? I know my assignment. I'm doing it. I'm here with you. So your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you. What is he going to pray about? He's going to pray and ask God for wisdom, right? And whatever else he's going to pray about to make sure that he completes the assignment. Maybe the first step in starting your assignment is recognizing that, there's pain, there's fear. And speaking of fear, one of the things that tries to gnaw at me, especially in the very beginning for me, is because of my lived experiences, that I've mentioned already, and I'll mention from time to time, I had to really examine myself. And one of the things I found that was harboring in my heart is I just did not believe that God would do anything good for me. Honestly, I have to be honest. That God would do anything good, because I had experienced so many negative experiences. I had experienced rejection. I mean, like boatloads of it. From family, from external persons. When you carry rejection around with you, it's like, it just attaches. It's like, it's magnetized. Like you just kind of like draw that stuff and all these other parts. And I have to say this to you, that the scripture talks about without faith it's impossible to please God. That is true. It's true. And if you're not a Christian, there are different quotes that addresses this. For example, I believe it was Carl Jung. He says, whatever you resist, it will persist. You keep resisting, like you keep ignoring, resisting, ignore that stuff that's happening on the inside. It persists. It will just keep coming. You just keep attracting this stuff. So, from a psychology standpoint or a social science standpoint, you keep resisting that thing, you keep ignoring that thing, it's there. It will continue, as in the 21st century language, it will continue to manifest in different ways in your life. So just in case you're listening and you don't connect with me from a Christian perspective, a more neutral or I would say contemporary way of thinking about this is with Carl Jung. And there are other writers. I can go on and on about different examples to explain this point, and to say that deep down we have to get honest about what's lurking. We have to look at it. Again, poetry helps us to look at these parts of ourselves. Let's pause. What's percolating so far? What will courage look like for you? And remember, you have an assignment. What's your assignment? I'm almost finished for today. What's your assignment? What's your assignment? Okay. What's your assignment? I don't know. Maybe you can drop it in a comment below. What's your assignment? Just tell me maybe one word. My assignment. So assignment equals, or just drop, I don't know what it is. Writing, poetry, working on myself. I don't know. What's your assignment? Another thing I want to share too before I go is that growth isn't always like something that's dramatic, like it's boom, and no, it often looks like choosing hope over disappointment, believing in yourself after a rejection, because believe me, it's gonna come. I have to accept that. You have to accept that. I was speaking to one of my clients this week. This client said to me, I watched that video you made about, how about identity. I was like, great. And how about being? I was like, oh, great. Side note. So I have not been podcasting, but the Reflection series is it's like a mini podcast, and it's a way of staying in touch with my practice community and supporting those who still want to be supported and still want to be a part of this active community. This is a good time for me to say that I am entering my implementation year of my research, my doctoral research, and my graduation, Lord willing, will be May 2027. I will be defending my dissertation spring of 2027. So I'm right there, and so I'm very excited about that. And so this is my way of staying in touch with the practice community to continue this work, to know that there's a transition coming for me. And so we continue on this path and this journey together, as I move forward, as we move forward. So growth is not always dramatic. Again, as I said before, it's deciding to show up one more day and one more day. I'm telling you, this doctoral program really required me to do so. It has not been easy. You've seen my videos. You've seen the bags under my eyes. You've seen days where I just, you've seen them. And this is what courage is. Remember, courage does not come from feeling like you want to do something. No, that feeling comes after you've done that thing that you need to do. I promise you, right? It's called brain-derived neurotrophic benefits, right? Like when you exercise and you feel good, you feel just like you can just like, man, climb a mountain, right? That's BDNF. You rewarded your neurotransmitters, right? You feel happy. That's what courage does. Courage doesn't come by looking for something to happen, for wishing it. No, that feeling only comes after you've done that thing over and over and over again. And before you know, you look back and you see the results of what you've done. So think about that. Think about what courageous step that you can take. And again, it's just probably one thing that you repeat every day. Taking a shower, brushing your teeth, making that phone call, being disciplined with whatever. I don't know where you are in the world listening to this, but that one thing, and I'm going to end on this note. There's a writer that I like. Her name is Keith Weingarten. You probably can look her up. Her work is cited over 361 times. I was like, wow. And in her peer-reviewed article, she talks about reasonable hope. I like it. The scripture talks about faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So it's that thing, it's that now thing that you hold on to. It's that deep belief, and that belief that drives the courage to do, to move, to do something. That's what faith does. It's not like this passive, inactive kind of thing. No. So that's what the scripture says. Now, I like the literature because some people cannot align or connect with the spiritual Christian side of things. I'd always leave room for other persons to participate, and I love doing that. So Keith Weingarten talks about reasonable hope. And in her literature, she talks about reasonable hope, meaning something you can do now, today. In her work, she talks about hope sometimes can be imagined as something next year. Or, I hope to get my doctorate degree, and I do, and I will. But in the meantime, how am I going to get to that? How will I get to that? Well, how I'm going to get to that is by showing up every day. Showing up every day. Whatever I need to do. So reasonable hope is that thing that you can do right now. Right now. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So you can see the parallel with what Keith Weingarten talks about and what the scripture says. I like to make it plain like that. You see? So whichever you can connect with it and integrate that into your next step of courage. So 6:33, and I try to go only for half an hour because it's not a full podcast, but I want to share a little bit of exciting thing with you. Can you see this? This is something my colleague did in our doctoral cohort. She ordered sashes ahead of time of our graduation coming up in May. Isn't this beautiful? And instantly I picked out my name, Dr. Keisha Henry. Can I tell you, she sent this to us on WhatsApp. When I opened WhatsApp and I saw that with all of our names, tears just rolled down my face. Because it's happening. It is happening. We're like right around the corner. What's right around the corner for you? Or what can be right around the corner for you? Again, remember, sometimes courage is simply showing up for yourself one more day. One more day. One more day. And day by day, we get it done. Listen, it was great talking to you. Thank you for listening to me tonight. Thank you for allowing me to share, again, my personal lived experiences, also my professional expertise. I'm so humbled by you listening and willing to share this information. And we continue to grow together. We continue to grow together. And again, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next week, Saturday. Take care. And remember, every woman and girl deserves a positive self-esteem. Thank you. Bye-bye.